Hello and welcome to our talks on the bull herding pictures. This time we're looking at the three verses or three poems that are regularly attached to these. Just to explain a little bit though, if you are a bit new or would just like a reminder about what the bull herding pictures are and how they came about. Originally these were Chinese. They were developed sometime during the medieval period. The originals have been lost, but copies have been made. Copies were made by a Japanese monk later on, around about the 14th, 15th century, and we still have those originals. And these are the ones that are perhaps most famously known. If you, for example, go and look at the Wikipedia page on the 10 ox herding pictures, as they're sometimes called, the ones given there are indeed these copies that were made. But it was always considered that these copies were very faithful to the original. What's also just important to say is that there are several renditions of this analogy. This is a training analogy of the spiritual journey undertaken by those who undertake the Zen training. It's a process of transformation of the heart. And there are slightly different versions of this, but we'll be using the versions that appear both in the book by Myokyo-ni, Venerable Myokyo-ni, called Gentling the Bull, also in the other accompanying book that goes with that called The Bull and His Herdsman by Master Otsu. And these are the same pictures that you find on Wikipedia under the 10 ox herding pictures. So just to also say, we're going to be using the term bull rather than the term ox, which is perhaps more frequently used. And the reason for that is that the bull itself, of course, represents the emotional household. And the emotional household is not a beast of burden. As we know, our emotions can be somewhat capricious, and this is why the term bull is used, because when you are walking along and you come to a field with a sign on it that says beware of the bull, and the public footpath goes across it, you sort of take a risk walking in the bull's field. He may ignore you, or he may charge. You never quite know. And a little bit, that's what the emotions can be like. They can be triggered very suddenly by a situation, and another time, a similar situation, may not bother us at all, or only half as much. So this is why the bull is used rather than an ox, the ox being the beast of burden, rather domesticated as that. And the herdsman represents not I, of course, because the Buddha declared I to be a delusion, so that could not be. The herdsman represents human nature, the human nature of the human heart. And the important thing to understand is the relationship between these two, and these 10 bull herding pictures describe that relationship, certainly for the first or certainly for the bulk of those pictures, up to about picture number 7. So we are going to be now. In the last course, we looked at the image itself, and we also looked at the preface that accompanies this. So, just to explain, over time, as well as having the original pictures, originally there were just the pictures, but then they accumulated a preface, an explanatory preface, which is just a paragraph that's normally associated with them, and also a number of verses were associated with them, of which we are going to look at 3. There are others, but we are just going to look at 3, and these 3 are the most popular verses that are associated with each of the bull herding pictures. These are the ones that generally, if you pick up a book on the bull and his herdsman with the verses, with the preface, these are the ones you will probably come across. And in the past, as I say, in the last course, because we were just looking, because that was an introduction to these pictures, there's a lot of material, so we were just looking at the herdsman picture and also at the preface. And this time, we're going to be looking at the poems. So for this talk, we are going to be looking at the 3 poems that are connected with the first picture. So I'm going to presume that as listeners, you have some familiarity with these 10 bull herding pictures. So as I say, if you don't have that familiarity, go and have a look at the audio course, the Zen Bullherding Pictures. That will fill in the gaps for you. So I really want this series of talks to build on the material we've already been looking at. So yes, we're having these 3 poems. So first thing is, why poems? Why are poems being attached to a series of pictures that describe a spiritual transformation? Well, poetry, it has and is used widely in spiritual disciplines and in religion generally. I mean, if you think about the Bible, for example, in the Old Testament, we have the Psalms and the songs that we find there also. So poetry is used because it's trying to bring over a sense of something deeply spiritual that cannot really be fully described in words. And the beauty of poetry, of course, is that it tries to recreate or evoke an experience of life. So, for example, if you want to know about love, you can find out about it in different layers, so to speak. There are different facets to love. If you want to understand the neurology of it, you can go and talk to a neurologist who will explain about the neurotransmitters and the hormones that are released, etc. If you want to understand about the behavior of people in love, then you can go and talk to a psychologist who will explain about motivation and instinct and the behaviors that all that produces. But if you want to know what it's like to be in love, then go and read a love poem, because the love poem is the poet's evocation, if you like, of that experience that she or he has in the heart of the one who reads it. So so poetry is very good at that. And of course, when it comes to a spiritual journey, well, a spiritual journey is actually a highly subjective experience, as all our experiences are subjective. We experience life subjectively. And in a way, it's a closed world. We can see what people do, we can hear what people say, but what they're experiencing is actually what other people experience is closed off from us, unless they tell us in some way, either through words or gestures or facial expression or behavior. And then we can infer. We can never actually see it. We can only infer it. So poetry is simply the medium, the artistic medium, or an artistic medium that can bring that over. And it brings it over by evoking in oneself the experience of others. So this is why poems are used so much in a spiritual practice. We are able to communicate with people hundreds, even thousands of years ago, and we recognize in their experience our own. So there's a unity there. It's its own samadhi, if we like. There is that connection there. So looking at we've got 3 poems, obviously, for this first one. This first picture is called Searching for the Bull, and just to remind ourselves, in this landscape, it's a wilderness. There's a herdsman who's looking. Clearly, his feet are pointing in one direction. He looks over his shoulder in another. He looks a bit lost. There's a wilderness about him. We cannot see a bull anywhere at all. There's just the herdsman. And the first poem goes, alone in a vast wilderness, the herdsman searches for his bull in the in the tall grass. Wide flows the river, far range the mountains, and ever deeper into the wilderness goes the path. Wherever he seeks, he can find no trace, no clue, exhausted and in despair. As the evening darkens, he hears only the crickets in the maples. Very sort of classic Chinese poem. Short but highly evocative. So, alone in a vast wilderness. Yeah, and as the picture shows, he is indeed in a wilderness. And this wilderness, of course, is not necessarily an actual desert. It's the experience of being in a wilderness. And I remember my only trip to a desert actually was when I went to Egypt, and I was in the Sinai Peninsula, and obviously I was part of a tourist bus, so I wasn't exactly alone in the vast wilderness. But when you go to something like that, you sort of want to walk away from the crowd, as it were, into that wilderness. And there's something incredibly stark about it. I mean, people talk about the sort of elemental feeling that goes with such a place. You have sky and you have rock and sand, and the absence of detail does something to how we experience it. When we leave habitation and go out into the wilderness, we really get a sense of smallness in the vastness of the universe, or in the vastness of the world. And I think that that's really what's being brought over here. There are moments in our lives when we really begin to realize, just as the Buddha did, when he left the palace, or as Prince Siddhartha, Prince Gautama did when he left the palace and went out into the world, and suddenly we're confronted by its overwhelming nature and overpowering nature. In his case, it was horrific because he saw old age, sickness, and death, and this struck him really deeply. But it could just be, it could be an experience of wildness or a thunderstorm. I remember once a couple of friends of mine who were together, and they had a daughter, and they went walking in the Yorkshire Dales, and they were walking along a road, and there was a fence on either side. And they sort of said, come on, we've gone to get back to nature. Why don't we leave the road and go out actually onto the moorland? So they sort of hopped over the fence and began walking away from the road. The road was behind them, out into the moorland. The North York Moors also has that. If you've ever been, there's a wilderness there. And they said that they got about 100 yards, and they sort of all simultaneously stopped, looked at each other and said, I think we'll go back to the road. And she described it. She said it was just an overwhelming feeling of panic. It was like suddenly feeling completely lost, and that you might not find your way back. And I think, there's an inner experience that we have about that. There are times in our lives when we are confronted by this sense of life just being overwhelming, and that we can never go back, as it were. We can never, or we may have difficulty going back to our sort of more safer world. And this is important, because if we recognize that, if you look at the stories of the Zen masters, there are lots of examples where something happened. There was some kind of trauma, because that's the modern term for this, really. There was some kind of trauma that happened that, as it were, propelled people, or propelled the individual out of that sort of safe cocoon that we like to build around ourselves, with our things and our family and our home and our friends and our routines. All these things, in a way, help, well, not in a way, all these things help us feel safe. They help us know who we are and what we are about. They give us meaning. But every so often you have a rupture from that. And it could be, being made unemployed. It could be a serious illness. It can be a relationship breakdown. But when that happens, suddenly we find ourselves full of fear. This feeling of I has been disrupted as well. And that's the thing. The Buddha said that the feeling of I was a delusion. And not only is it a delusion, but the fact is it's made up of these elements of our life that we identify with. The clothes we wear, where we hang out, all that sort of stuff. So this alone in the wilderness is referring to these occasions when that breaks down. And in it, the herdsman searches for the bull, for his bull, it says, in the tall grass. So in this case, this herdsman actually has an advantage, because he knows there's something else, and he knows that, because what often happens when our life is ruptured in that way is that we seek to run away and build another house and go and live in it. This is what Master Rinzai said of this. that it's like leaving one house only immediately to enter into another. That rather than going out and meeting the world as it is and discovering something about the nature of the world and our own nature simultaneously, we hide from it. And in this case, the herdsman has obviously heard something, because if he's searching for the bull, then he obviously has at least heard of its existence. So this is rather like someone who has perhaps come into the Buddha's teachings originally, has heard terms like Buddha nature or the Buddha heart, and obviously not really understanding what it is, but it sort of seems to awaken something inside us, and so it motivates us to go and look. Wide flows the river, far range the mountains, and ever deeper into the wilderness goes the path. So a rather beautiful description of the landscape. That river is wide, and if you need to cross a river and there's no bridge and there's no boat and there's no ford, and you're thinking, how am I going to do this? And I really, really need to get across. It's really important to me. Then that river looks extremely wide indeed. If there's a bridge over it, you just go over the bridge or you catch the ferry or whatever. It doesn't seem so wide. But if when the problem needs to be solved, and it's looking difficult, then that small molehill can very quickly appear as a mountain. So wide flows the river, far range the mountains. The ending seems such a long way, and in fact, in Buddhism, a lot is made of that, isn't it? Because we talk of, becoming Buddha, but in endless chiliocosms of lifetimes and all this sort of thing as well. It's put a long way away. We're really made to feel small in this vast cosmic drama, so to speak. And ever deeper into the wilderness goes the path. Wherever he seeks, he can find no trace, no clue, exhausted and in despair. So wherever he seeks, he can find no trace and no clue. And this is interesting because actually, if we go back to the preface, which is, I know we're not looking at in detail, but the first line of the first two sentences of the first preface of the first picture says, the search for what? The bull has never been missing. But here it's saying, wherever he seeks, he can find no trace, no clue. So there's really a case that, there's this feeling that, in almost like a teasing feeling, that we're looking for something that's right before our eyes or right under our nose. And of course, this ties in very much with indeed what the Zen masters are always saying. Look at the place where your own feet stand. Yes, but what about the higher truths and the great koans? Look at the place where your own feet stands. Or fetching wood and carrying water. When hungry I eat, when tired I sleep. Yes, I understand that. But what else? What else is there? There's always that but. But what? And always that's chopped off. That's cut away, so that once again we settle back to exactly where we are, instead of this constant restlessness that's always seeking to move me about and from one place to another, and to search and to make progress and to gain and so forth. All that is always knocked back. If you have a look at a lot of the sayings of the Zen masters, they all circulate around this same point, that we are looking for something afar that is actually to hand already. Master Hakuin puts it, in the midst of water, pitifully crying from thirst. Wherever he seeks, he can find no trace, no clue, exhausted and in despair. And actually, that exhausted and in despair is really important, because of the restlessness, which is called dukkha, drives us. And it's to understand that our desires really do drive us, that they are merciless taskmasters, constantly driving us on. There's always the next thing, isn't it? Isn't this one of the complaints that we have about trying to give myself? Here I am trying to give myself into the hoovering, and I'm already thinking about what to make for dinner at exactly the same time. There's this, that is the restlessness. That is dukkha. Just that is dukkha, and to recognize it as such. And it's only when we become exhausted, when we're really tired out, that actually there's some respite from that. In fact, the desires begin to dissolve away for a time. They dissolve away because that fatigue, if we are truly physically tired, we've simply run out of energy, and we cannot formulate our desires as hotly as we do when we're pumped up. So, in fact, that exhausted and in despair is important. And again, if you look at some of the stories of the awakenings of the Zen masters, there's often this period of chasing one's tail until one is exhausted, and it's only when it comes to the point of being close to collapse that suddenly something happens. The key falls on the table, or there's the smell of peach blossoms, or the pebble goes against the bamboo. As the evening darkens, he hears only the crickets in the maples. So again, if you imagine that we've got this sort of darkness, there's the maple trees, and we can hear the sounds of crickets in the darkness. And of course, if you've ever tried looking for a cricket, you'll know that it's very, very difficult. You can hear them because they're very loud. And again, there's this sense of something beyond vision, something that I'm not quite seeing, but that we have a strong sense of. We can sense that it's there, but we are feeling frustrated because we cannot find it, despite the fact that we're running around all over the place. But of course, as soon as you approach a cricket, it shuts up, and then suddenly it appears from further away, and so we go after it, and then as you get close to it, it shuts up again. So yes, there's this constant running around, and this is the running around after the things that we desire. By the way, these cricket sounds are the little objects of desire that we run around. Of course, what we don't recognize at that time, in our hotness for acquiring whatever it is, whether it's a thing or an idea, that what we're chasing after is our own heart. Our heart has simply become draped over the object or over the idea, and this now becomes the thing that simply must be. I must, it must become. I must have this. Otherwise, my life is meaningless. But in fact, what we're after is not the particular object. It's our own heart, which we have mistaken for the object. They become conflated. So looking at the second poem, looking only into the distance, the searching herdsman rushes along. Does he know his feet are already deep in the swampy morass? So there we are. You see, again, similar theme with this headlong rushing. He's looking into the distance. He's not looking where his own feet stand. The searching herdsman rushes along, probably trampling over flowers and trampling over insects, and who knows, let's hope they all get out of the way quickly, because he's certainly being quite heedless, and yet he's probably talking about mindfulness and meditation and so on and so forth. But actually, when it comes to it, he's not putting it into practice. And it's a little bit like the old Hasidic story, when a famous rabbi comes to a nearby city, and in a town not too far away, a little group with their own local rabbi are all looking forward to going to hear the great rabbi talk. And someone says to the local rabbi, he says, "Are you looking forward to hearing the talk?" And the rabbi responds, says, I'm more looking forward to seeing how this great rabbi ties his shoelaces, because this is where the truth is really revealed. Do we live it? As well as, one thing to be able to speak eloquently, but it's another to be able to truly live out of it. Does he know his feet are already deep in the swampy morass? Well, no, he doesn't at this time. And so he gets himself into trouble. So he finds that he's still afflicted, despite his best intentions. How often in the fragrant grasses, under the setting sun, he has hummed Shinpo, the song of the herdsman, in vain. So there he is, sitting in those fragrant grasses, under the setting sun, at the end of another day. And he's humming this song, the song of the herdsman, but he's doing so in vain. And it's a little bit like, this is, we hum to ourselves to sort of chivvy ourselves along or to cheer ourselves up. If we were really walking through the woods at night, for example, or through a wilderness, and perhaps we're feeling a little bit frightened, and we might sing to ourselves or hum to ourselves in order to lighten the heart a little bit, because we want to keep that fear at bay. And I think it has something of that he's really beginning to feel the fear and the frustration, but he's holding on with this song of the herdsman. And a little bit, this is sort of like what we can do as well. We have our favourite texts, or we have a favourite talk, and we go back to it and we listen to it when we're feeling sort of somewhat deflated, when things aren't going so well, in order to cheer ourselves up. I used to remember many years ago, because I was a great Star Wars fan of the first three. And I used to watch those films before going on 5-day sessions, which I used to find quite difficult and I knew were quite arduous. And so, in order to sort of steel myself up, I would iron my clothes for the session whilst watching Star Wars, which is sort of ironic, considering that we were always advised when we were doing the household chores to just really give ourselves into those, and not to distract ourselves with radio and TV. But it did work. It used to sort of give me a little sort of shot in the arm. And well, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because eventually I stopped doing it, and I still carried on going to the sessions. So, did I really need it? Probably not. I mean, it made me feel better, but did it actually have any practical application? I'd have gone anyway. So in that case, probably not. But it's interesting. We have those little things. I remember doing it when I used to smoke. I sort of think, oh, I've got such and such coming up. I'll go and have a cigarette, and that'll, fortify me. Or if I'm going through something and it's a long, difficult meeting or whatever, I think, oh, can't wait for this to be over, and then I can go and have a cup of coffee and a cigarette. Yeah, we do that all the time. I mean, the fact is we could get through those meetings or through those difficulties without it. But, they provide a certain amount of alleviation. So we can't sniff at them or can't be too judgmental about them. And then we have the last verse. There are no traces in the origin. Where then to search? Gone astray, he stumbles about in dense fog and tangled growth. Though unwitting, grasping the nose of the bull, he already returns as a guest. Yet under the trees, by the edge of the water, how sad is his song. So we end sort of as we begin, with that sense of sadness and frustration, and that real sense of stumbling around and feeling lost. And how important that is, that is actually really important, because unless we get to that point of feeling lost or feeling knocked out of our comfortable palace, so to speak, then why would we bother undertaking a difficult training in the first place? We have to feel the need. So, although it seems very sad and and unfortunate and something wrong, actually it's not wrong. It's right, because this provides the motivational power to begin to search for the lasting truth, a truth that will truly satisfy. So there are no traces in the origin. Where then to search? So, in a way, there's no this origin that's being referred to is, of course, the emptiness of shunyata. And this is perfectly true. There are no traces. There's no bull. There's no herdsman. We chant the Heart Sutra, don't we? Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is no different from emptiness, and emptiness is no different from form. And the same for the other skandhas. And then we come to the six sense bases, and there's no eye, no nose, no ear, no and etc. And there's no noble truths of cause or stopping or way to stopping. There's no attainment. There's no non-attainment. All those things are sort of negated because there are no traces in the origin. Originally, in the true nature of things, everything is quite empty. And so, who can search for what? This is the meaning of the Sixth Patriarch's poem. When he says that, talking about that heart mirror that has no stand, if there is truly nothing whatsoever, what dust can a light wear? And so it is the same. What herdsman can search for a bull? Gone astray, he stumbles about in dense fog and tangled growth. So that dense fog, of course, is the avidya, vidya, often translated as delusion or ignorance. But it's not ignorance or through lack of knowledge, it's ignorance not being able to see. Avidya means not to see. Vidya has the same root as the Latin term vidare, which we get our term video from, or video from. It has the same root. So vidya means to see, and avidya is the negation of it. Though unwitting, grasping the nose of the bull, he already returns as a guest. Yeah, as once we begin to become familiar with what the bull truly is, then we see that indeed, not only do we have the bull's nose ring, he also has our nose, and he pulls us along as well, because we haven't recognized in our hot rushing about, in our restlessness, we haven't recognized the hoof print of the bull that is all over that. And this is eventually where we will start looking. Yet though unwitting, grasping the nose of the bull, he already returns as a guest. So that returns as a guest, this host and guest, is a quite a popular metaphor and analogy. So that particularly Master Rinzai. The host and the guest. The host is the one in charge, and the guest is the one who comes in, but has a second place. So the host has the first place, and the guest has the second place. It's about first and second. So although he thinks he's in charge, actually he's the guest of the bull. And this is the case because the bull, who is the symbol of all our desires wrapped up together. Those are the three fires that we find at the center of the wheel of life: the wanting, aversion, and the delusion, our hot opinionatedness. These are the things that drive us, and they tell us where we can go and where we can't go. And who chooses what we desire? Well, it's not I, that's for sure. We are simply driven along by it. And so in this way, the passions are the host and we are the guest. Yet under the trees by the edge of the water, how sad is his song. And there is that really sort of melancholy air. But as we've said, hope is not actually lost, despite the fact that in that melancholy we may feel somewhat cast down. Actually, there is great hope. We are in a good place to begin to embark upon our journey. So for now, we'll leave it there. That is the end of the poems for the first picture.